Welcome to In the Now with Jim Swilley. We're in a series right now talking about energy coherence with our friend Zach Keogh. This will be part 6. If you're watching this without having watched the previous ones, please now go back to parts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 so that you'll have a sense of context what we're talking about. Those of you who are here at Metron, once again, please welcome our friend Zach. Welcome back. Welcome back, Zach. Do it again. Uh, 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 uh. Do we need to do explanation of last week, or do you just want to pick up where we
No,
were?
we'll go ahead and move on. I think we've covered pretty much the wave tops
All right.
from last week, so we'll go ahead and move on. Next slide. I think we're at next slide. So I didn't cover this slide real quick. So we will recap a little bit. So last week we talked about our 3 big gut busters, really, which is gluten, which produces a protein that's called zonulin. The body produces this protein that's called zonulin that wreaks all kind of havoc, not within our intestinal tract, but outside the intestinal tract. It's when it gets outside that stomach lining and into our bloodstreams that it begins to wreak a great deal of havoc. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, PPIs, and this thing down here said, what about selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors? Well, SSIRs are designed to increase your serotonin levels within your brain. The problem is that for people that struggle with depression specifically, may not struggle with the lack of serotonin in their brain. It might be as a result of lack of serotonin within their intestinal tract. So when they go see their doctors and they offer them drugs, and it's like, well, you know, your serotonin levels are right where they should be, maybe as a result of taking the SSRIs, but they haven't looked at the serotonin levels within the stomach.
Man, that's so important. If you're on antidepressant, work out your own salvation. I'm just telling you, I talk to so many people that just keep taking more and more, and they're spiraling downward. It's like it's not helping. So there has to be another source, and it's what's coming from here.
Absolutely. And every drug, I don't care what it is, every drug that you take has a second and third order effect. It does. But last week when
Explain that. What do you mean?
So for every drug, and normally, typically, when you take a drug, there's usually a side effect that comes with it, maybe side effects that come with it. And then for those side effects, you need another drug to treat that symptom.
Okay.
And then so forth and so on. And before you know it, you've got a whole cabinet full of drugs. And if you're looking and you think, oh my God, how did I get to this point? Is because the first thing the doctors want to prescribe you is something to address the symptoms, not the problem, but the symptoms. Thank God for our doctors. I love them. But you have to be smart enough to know what it is at your very core, at your atomic level, what it is that's affecting your body in the way that it's affecting it, right? You have to do your research. If you're depending on Doc to give you the answers, he's probably not going to give you the answers. He's going to give you something that's going to treat the symptom, right? So I can't remember who it was. One of the people here that one of you all came up and asked me. We were talking, and I said, you know, it's strange that when we go to doctors, right? Typically, the first thing they want to ask us is, what kind of drugs are you taking? But if I go,
what are you eating?
not what are you eating, right? But if I go to a veterinarian and my dog's sick or whatever, and the first thing I ask you, well, what's he been eating?
Very interesting. Yeah.
No. They won't mention it. Again, because a lot of that is because it's very new, right? So the research is relatively new. Granted, within primarily, again, zonulin was only discovered 20 years ago. And I'm going to go over some more things that we'll cover here in just a little bit that wasn't even discovered until about 1993, early 90s. So when doctors find these new discoveries, it's not that though they can go out and say, hey, we found the problem. No, we've got to do more research. Because in order to present this, to make a valid point, we have to have the research, the substantiated evidence to back it up. We just can't say, hey, this is what we think. But I'm here to tell you today that a lot of this, and this is my perspective when it comes to health. My food is my medicine.
Yeah.
If I don't see my food as my medicine, I'm liable to just go out and eat just almost anything, or at least not change my diet.
And it's amazing when you really study it. There's something for everything. There's natural sedatives, natural laxatives, natural what. It's all. I mean, you have to investigate because it's not right in your face, but it's all there. Like the Mother Earth is programmed. Everything that you need is already there. And I will also say this: even in this world of processed food and chemicals and all the stuff, it's easy just to say, look, there's no way to win. Everything's already so contaminated. I don't believe that. You know, I think about the analogy of when the Israelites were still in Egypt and they lived in the land of Goshen. Even though all of Egypt was under the curse, they weren't. Like they lived separate from the curse. That's why Moses wrote the 91st Psalm when he said, 1,000 will fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand. It will not come near you. So don't be conformed to this world. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Just because everybody else is, poisoning themselves doesn't mean you have to. And again, some things you're just going to have to pray over because food is processed. It is, unless you just have your own garden that you're, eating out of. I mean, you don't know where everything's coming from, but don't just surrender to the system. You can live free of the curse.
Yeah, absolutely, and it really is. It's all about making better choices for your body. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. I think we've covered everything we need to there. This is something that I captured off the internet, and I thought it was worth sharing. So always trust your gut. If you feel something is wrong, it's probably because there is. Yeah. Right? And that's not just with your physical body.
Right.
That may be something that's going on mentally or maybe even spiritually.
That's
right?
why I think this teaching is important because I'm a big believer in trust your. We call it gut instinct or intuition, but if your physical gut is not functioning like it's supposed to, you can get wrong signals. Like low blood sugar can make you feel a certain way. That it's not emotional; it's physical, it's physiological. Sometimes you think you're depressed, you're just hungry. It's like you need to know what's really going on with you.
Absolutely. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, this is from Dr. Violdo again. He says basically plants provide vital intelligence to the body beyond ensuring a balanced diet. Wait a second. You mean to tell me plants provide vital intelligence? Absolutely. Plants, when ingested and digested, have a certain amount of epigenetic information that they communicate to the cells, right? In this case, and I'll use for an example, we'll talk about it here in a couple slides later, it sends signals to the cells. It activates what's referred to as, it's a protein inside the cells called, we'll refer to it as NRF2, right? And that NRF2 protein, when it's activated, it goes outside the cell and it begins turning cells on and turning some cells off. In other words, it does what it's supposed to do without you thinking about it. So your body is comprised of 500 disease-preventing genes and up to 200 disease terminating genes, right? So
Wow.
These plants convey the information that they have. And again, NRF2, and again, we'll cover this here in more depth in just a little bit, but it's a single strand of plant genetic material that when your body's ingested, it takes the information out of there, that epigenetic information, and it begins to synthesize it, begins to process it, and it sends signals to the cells. That's amazing.
Sure.
It does, just the amount, information from plants. Think about this. In more ways than one, now we're talking about digesting plants, right? What about the effects that plants have on us when it comes to other faculties of the body, right? David said, when I lie down in green pastures, or when I lay down
The trees of the field clap their hands.
Exactly.
Even Jesus saying, consider the lilies.
When I take a nature walk, that is so soothing. I'm telling you, there's so much more to, I'm going to say the wilderness, because a wilderness might mean something different for some people, like a desert, and there's no leaves in desert. But there's so much more to our green leaf-based diet, if you will, than we would give it credit for. A lot of people, they sway away from it because it doesn't have protein. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you can get, you can get too much protein in the body. I don't know if you know that or not.
Yeah.
But you can get too much protein, and it has an adverse effect on the body. And I know especially this is
But there are edible plants that are high in protein as well.
absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, can we go to the next slide? I think it kind of buttress my point here. I don't make sure I want to get too far ahead of myself. Okay, now we go back to the slide. I want to cover this one in just a minute. But again, there's a lot of information that plants, when digested by the body, conveys that information, and it begins to prompt certain proteins, in this case the NRF2 protein, out of the cell to go and fight free radicals of sort, right? Toxins, wastes of sorts in the body, and begins to not eliminate those, but eliminate in some degree, but also flushing those free radicals and toxins out of the body. Right? Last week we talked about a yeast that somehow finds its way into the gut lining, and it sits there. It's called Candida albicans, right? And that Candida, when it sits there, and again, it has a pervasive effect on throughout the body, it prevents your body from creating serotonin. And when your body doesn't create enough serotonin, you're not going to have that, I feel good about myself. You don't even wake up some days and be like, oh, today, man, I feel super good. You ever wonder why you feel super good? Think about the last 24 hours. What did I eat? But instead, we kind of go over it like, oh, today I feel good for some unknown reason. I don't know why, but I'm going with it. Think about what you ate the last 24 hours. And I promise you, you may see a difference. I promise you. But if I go forth and I just continue on eating, following the certain eating habits that I have been for so long, the mornings I wake up and I feel, oh man, da, da, da. When it becomes so notable that when you wake up and you feel good about yourself, every morning you should, wake up and feel good about yourself. I want that for all of you. I want it for myself. But I have to take into account what I'm eating that's allowing me to feel that way, right? And there are certain foods that will communicate to my body that allow me to feel that way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Let's put a comma right here before we start the next slide, but that's a very important point about the intelligence that's in plants and how it communicates even the cells of your body. You remember back in the 60s when it became fashionable for people to start talking to their plants, and some people would make fun of that, but it actually, studies have been done where plants actually have emotional responses, like plants that have been abused respond not the same way that animals do, but there is evidence that everything really is living. And when David would tap into that, he hadn't dropped acid. He was actually hearing plants speak to him, and it's really interesting. I know Dr. Sheila was in here earlier, but sometimes she'll even, because some of the minerals and that sort of thing. What do you call them, Doc? The things that you have, the homeopathic medicines. Before she'll give it to you, she'll actually hold it up to your body to see if your body is going to respond to it. And sometimes she'll say, "No, your body's saying no." It's like there's so much communication going on. I'm not traditional about saying grace over food, but there is something about even speaking over your food and blessing it. And even, like, I don't eat that much meat, but when I do, I even will thank the animal. It's like, I know that sounds kind of out there, but I'm like, well, I'm going to bless this because this is a part of the food chain, the circle of life, and I am flexitarian. I'm not completely vegan or vegetarian, but what I love about what you're talking about here is the more spiritual you become, the more connected you are to the physical world, and vice versa. The more connected you are to the physical world, the more it advances you spiritually, because everything is everything. Everything is connected. So that's some good stuff. Let's put a comma right there. Once again, thank Zach for being with us today. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time on In the Now with Jim Swilley. Peace.